Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor Greg Dooley and the Pundit Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
It's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark. We're proudly presented by Nick Hopwood. He's a certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with peak confidence. Visit Nick's website at peakwm.com. It's another edition of the Professor and the Pundit. And Greg, for once, the Michigan men's basketball season, when they don't win a national championship, didn't end in misery because of a bad call. It wasn't because of a final shot that broke our hearts.
A timeout.
Or being completely outmatched. It was a game. Michigan went as far as they could. I think it's a rare instance where most people are satisfied.
I think so. And speaking of being satisfied, Steve, we've got 40,000 plays since we've started. Did you know that? Across
I did not
all
know
platforms. That. Amazing. Coming up on 50. Hey, that's because you followed us, you've told friends, you've commented. And by the way, Steve, a comment from Doc Jeff. I forgot to mention this. Remember you were saying we were trying to figure out what relation Cooper DeJean is of you, right?
Yes.
Okay. And a commenter, Doc Jeff, wrote, I'd say Cooper is your cousin-in-law once removed by marriage, is what he thinks.
Okay.
And to your lovely wife, her cousin once removed by marriage. So there you go. We even got people breaking down family trees for us behind the scenes. But that's how you can help us.
I appreciate it. I look at my family and its size, and I don't think anyone can remove anyone.
Yeah.
Especially not Cooper DeJean.
We might talk about that a little bit, by the way. Some of the tension out there, maybe that's where Nick's going to get involved. We'll talk about that, Steve. But hopefully not Cooper DeJean, because I like watching him play. And speaking of liking people play, we really enjoyed watching this. It was painful at times with this ride. It ends with Auburn. They come up short, and I just have to keep going back to they made us excited about basketball when we were at the absolute depths. Nearly into April now, Steve. They'll be hanging a banner, and this was our first season, of course, with Dusty May. It seems like we got the right guy. Questions remain. What's going to happen now? We got to get into all of that. But once again, we lose to Auburn, but in another seesaw where we had a big lead, this time in the second half, and in character for this team, a quick reversal of fortune. This one was bad. This might have been the worst reversal of fortune, Steve. What happened here?
Well, there's one thing I just want to know, Greg. Who jinxed it?
Somebody jinxed
it. As our listeners, who jinxed it? So as soon as the Wolverines went up by 9, their largest lead of the game, Auburn may have flipped a switch, but I believe a listener of ours said something that caused the Tigers to go on a 20-2 run.
What are the common jinxes? Change seats, change drinks. What else?
You say something to somebody.
Like, say we got this.
It.
We got this.
I mean, biggest lead of the game. It's like, or you just start thinking. You go from we don't have a shot at all winning this game to thinking, I think we're going to pull this off.
I think Danny Wolf's the next Larry Bird. Like stuff like that?
Yeah. Something. So one of our listeners did it, but the Tigers went on a 20-2 run, outscored Michigan 34-8 after the Michigan biggest lead at 9. During that short period of time, Michigan in its next possessions turned the ball over 3 times, missed 2 layups, and the Michigan lead went from being up 9 to down 3. Turned the ball over 15 times in the game. That's characteristic of Michigan, but so did Auburn. Auburn turned it over 15 times too, so that evens itself out. But the Wolverines got beat on the glass, minus 15 in the rebound total, minus 9 in offensive rebounds, while the Tigers shot 47% in the second half. That, to me, was the difference. But an incredible, unexpected season and a one-year turnaround to likes that no one has ever seen before in college basketball.
Yeah, and excitement now in the postseason, and there's so much talk about the portal, and, the boomers out there, they don't like the portal, they don't like what it is, but there are good stories and good things that happen, and I'm going to talk about this in my NIL class this week. As much as it's criticized, you saw the emotion from a guy who's been here for few months, like Danny Wolf. And he used the phrase brothers for life when talking about the locker room.
It was arguably the greatest year of my life, and I made so many amazing relationships. I met my brothers for life, and we had an unbelievable locker room. And
we've seen other stories like that. I think each of the team that's still out there, they probably have a story like that with them. Yeah, I'll bring up a name that people don't like to talk about here, but for Michigan State, a guy like Kenneth Walker III, like, he's in the annals of Michigan State lore. And again, and it's funny, we laugh, but he was there for a few months, and then he disappeared.
And that's part of the criticism, too, but go on.
Yeah, there are the good outcomes and the good stories, and some special things can happen in a small window in sports, and that's one of the things we're seeing with the portal. I don't want to dismiss that.
Danny Wolf wanted to be at Michigan from day one. I mean, his entire family from his mom's side has Michigan ties, went to Michigan whatsoever. So Danny Wolf, I'm sure, isn't the only person on the Michigan team that feels the brothers for life concept, because they did go through a lot. In their first year with a brand new head coach, there was hardly anybody in the building for the home opener, and built this into this thing. And, there were some tough losses along the way, but there were some really gritty, gutty wins.
Yeah.
At the same time, the thing about the portal is feels this loss of connection between the people who are fans of a particular team, seeing somebody go in for 1 year and then out the next year. They feel it's more transactional. It always has been somewhat transactional. A player goes to a school that's more likely going to propel them to be NBA ready. You fall in love with the school after you visit it, after you see why it works for you. It's no different than a student going there for the first time. Whatever your major is, if you feel, you know what, I love the way how this school operates in my particular field of study, and I think this particular university is going to help me get to the next spot. It's no different with the athletes, but instead we've always been fed this type of deal where this player always wanted to be at said university and has been a fan for life. And we watch them grow up from a freshman to a fifth-year senior or a seventh-year COVID player, whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
and some of that fantasy land gets pulled away when you find out what happens behind the curtain.
It's probably a reason that I've talked about some of the women's sports more now than maybe I would have ever expected to. It is kind of the pull of the story of someone like Jordan Hobbs for Kim Barnes-Rico. Mm-hmm. And the fact is, we're probably going to watch these freshmen we've been talking about on this podcast for the women's hoops team. We're probably going to watch them for several years now. So we're going to get some of that. So I wonder if you are going to get a little shift to some of these other sports for that reason. So what else, Steve? What else is on your mind, man? Because it's just a wild time right now.
Yeah, when this season is over, fan bases and athletic departments, and I'll name Ohio State because they've actually said it, they're going and looking at themselves and saying, how did Dusty May do this in 1 year? It is one of the biggest turnarounds in NCAA history to go from 8 wins to a Sweet 16. And the second thing they're asking, is their own coach a Dusty May? And I'm sure the handshake lines in the Big Ten are like, stop making us look so bad, with a smile. You're putting a lot of pressure on us to win right away. Quit it, would you?
Yeah, no doubt.
There's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, no, that's a good problem. Speaking of Dusty, I'm trying to get him in my class, Steve, to speak in my leadership class. And the biggest threat is all this stuff going on right now. But I want to hear, maybe he'll share some stories of what other people think about him and things like that.
There is so much pressure right now because of the money for quick turnaround. And you had in football where, you got 3 years, and that's about it for a lot of teams and a lot of coaches, when it used to be a lot longer. And you know what it's like in the NBA game. Rookie head coaches get fired in a year. They don't make it to year 2. And so everyone would hate to see that in college football and basketball, but it could potentially happen. It may not, as they realize that you can destroy an entire program by letting a coach go. I mean, like the whole roster turns over.
Which, frankly, we're going to lose some players to graduation, possibly the NBA. So that's another reason why Dusty may not be in my class, because he's dealing with all this stuff. But what do you see here? Vlad Golden is definitely done, right? So let's start there, an important piece. That's clear, we think, that he's gone. What else? And Danny Wolf, what do you think of, he really showed some things out there in the court, a lot of film. Do you think he's gone to the NBA?
He's looking like a projected first-round pick. Not a lottery pick, but he's looking like a projected first-round pick. With that comes a 3-year guaranteed contract. Sometimes it can help you to stay an extra year, but a lot of times it seems to make matters worse if you hang on for an extra year as your game gets exposed a little bit. You realize that, to stop Michigan, you got to stop this guy, and you focus it all on him, and then all of a sudden you see the little quirks in people's game. But Danny Wolf is a tall guy who can move with the ball. He sees passing lanes. He's a finisher in the lane, and it seems like in a game where things can be spread out, that requires a good shot, which he does have a good three-point shot, and that he's able to drive with the ball. I think he dribbles the ball way too high for the NBA level, but that's something that can be worked on. Mid-first round pick, I'm kind of thinking that he would be leaving, that would be in his best interest.
Yeah, unless, Steve, back to what we want out of these players is that his love for Michigan, that locker room, but that speech that I mentioned kind of sounded like a quasi-goodbye as well. So maybe he knows something already. We're going to find out soon.
Dusty hinted a long time ago about his roster and the makeup could look dramatically different along with his game plan next season. But the thing is, I'm convinced that May can win without being pigeonholed to a certain style or roster. With Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf possibly going, the natural mind says, well, where are we going to get two Big Ten 7-footers to play next year? Well, it may not be that way. It may not have a roster that looks like that. It may be one guy. It might be a whole bunch of 6'8" and 6'9" guys like some of the teams that are playing in the Final Four this year. They need to retain who they have. They have to go out to the portal and get some help, especially in the front court. And today, Greg, they got some help in the backcourt.
Yeah, it looks like a transfer from North Carolina, which, what's the first thing that popped in your mind when I said a transfer from North Carolina, Steve, when we were talking about this?
Caleb Love and eligibility.
Yeah, and eligibility. And then earlier than that, they've had some NCAA issues related to academics there. So is he going to get through admissions? Do we already know that? Is that a done deal? Let's hope it is.
It's too early to tell. This broke just minutes from when we started recording today.
And he doesn't turn the ball over. He protects the ball. That's what we're going to fix that, right? Yes. Is that right, Steve?
Apparently, he turns the ball over quite a bit. This is Elliot Cadeau, okay. A former 5-star player, one of the best players in his class coming in. I think it was a class of 2023. He's been in North Carolina for 2 years. Been described from North Carolina insiders as a bit of a polarizing guy, but Michigan wants him. This is one of those things where you got to have faith in the basketball coach that he knows who he wants, it fits into his particular system, and need to cheer that they're happy with what they got because Michigan's happy with what they got.
Well, there's no reason to doubt this man at this point. That Dusty May, he successfully navigated this wild, all these pieces and parts, put together a Frankenstein team, got a Sweet 16, got a banner. There's no reason to doubt him.
I notice you're using a lot more Frankenstein references in the last few weeks.
It's probably the fact that I was the mad scientist in the Namari Burnett commercial, Steve, for Sonobrand, which, by the way, sold out, and they actually had to re-release. The promotion did really good of the Time for Madness. Yes.
Time for Madness!
I'm still waiting for my payment, which is going to be a few pieces of the gear. I'll make sure I wear those, Steve.
And don't forget your SAG card.
My SAG card, right. I've had a couple people say, no, seriously, you should update your IMDb. Update it. Like I have one. Yeah. Like I have one sitting there, it's the picture of a professor.
I want one.
I might do it if that's a thing.
I want to get a SAG card. I think about the closest thing that I could ever get to one is if John Bacon cast me as an extra in his leadership book.
Okay, I think he might cast you an extra.
As an extra?
In the movie about the Emmett Fitzgerald, but I don't think you want to be an extra in that one, Steve. I don't think.
Glug.
Yeah, I know how that one ends. That's not good. It's not good. Maybe a couple people survived. Maybe we don't know.
See those bubbles coming out of Lake Superior? That bubble's mine.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, my God. All right. Well, who else? We've got a good recruiting class, or at least a big-time player.
Big-time player. Trey McKinney is a 5-star combo guard from Orchard Lake St. Mary's, 17th ranked player in the nation. So Dusty did beat Tom Izzo on the recruiting trail this year. No, it makes you excited for Michigan basketball season a year after you weren't really excited at all. Now there'll be the expectations, and now will be the typical Michigan basketball season where nobody's happy at the end unless they win the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's what it's about. Yeah, you're right. I was thinking about what you just said about the expectations of we got to win now, because if you don't, there's a ton of finger pointing. It starts with the coach, but also donors, all this other stuff. Did we handle this right?
I spent $2 million for that.
Yeah, right. I've even heard some people criticize. You mentioned Tom Izzo, okay, they played out their seed, but that's it. Is he doing the right thing? Because that's one of the rosters that kind of stuck together, right? Should he be doing more out there? What else, man? Anything else on this team?
I just think that many coaches are recruiting people out in the portal right now, or recruiting future freshmen, and they're talking about how to win. This is our plans for how to become a winner. Dusty's staff can say, we're a winner in year one. This is not about how we get to be winning. We've already done it. And now this is how we're going to do it again. And that's a lot easier sell than promising somebody, we'll win, I think, and we could use your help.
I think you could even argue development, because if you look at Danny Wolf and how he was considered when he came in here, it was good. And then look at LJ Kason, how he developed through the year and earned that playing time.
He's a freshman.
Yeah, he definitely improved. So there's a lot going on. You didn't mention Justin Pippen, but it looks like he's going to take off, which I don't think is a big surprise.
He's in the portal.
He was getting some playing time early on. He's a good defender. He's very quick, decent shooter. But it doesn't look like he's probably not going to be part of the future. You never know. These guys go in the portal, they can come back out.
Sure.
Right? But
Jace Howard hit the portal too, by the way.
Jace Howard, there you go.
But Michigan won the Big Ten tournament, got to the Sweet 16. They know how to win.
Yep, but it sets up a pretty exciting weekend in the Final Four with all the number one seeds, Steve.
I like it.
Yeah.
I do like Cinderella to a point, but having the 9th or 10th overall seed playing in the Final Four against a 1 doesn't give me a lot of intrigue. Seeing 4 number 1 teams, seeing 3 of these teams be on KenPom's top 10 of all time facing against one another. I mean, we're truly seeing best versus best.
I heard that these are some of the highest quality teams according to that statistical measure. That's pretty amazing. I mean, to me, the most, other than the Michigan runs, some of the most exciting ones were, and no one would consider, say, Butler a Cinderella, but that story of Butler in that Duke game is one of the most memorable. But I am excited because of some of the talent, some of the things I saw this weekend in these teams.
What did you think of Auburn? You've seen them for 2 straight games now, right?
When they are rolling, I'll say that, our 2 7-footers are a problem for teams, and even the best teams. I think they got rattled. They weren't playing their best game. But in those last 12 minutes, you saw how good they could be. And then that Michigan State game, they just seemed so cool, calm, and above it all the entire game. Even when Broom went down and his arm got injured, they just seem like they've been there before. So there is something special about them. And
Broom played with one arm.
Yeah.
When he came back.
And then he just stepped in and knocked down that 3, no problem. I give State a ton of credit, by the way, and I listen to the radio coming in, some people, chiming in with glee that, State lost, and I don't take a ton of satisfaction in that. But Auburn was the better team. Auburn is the better team of Michigan State. They deserve to be there. I look at Duke. Duke's Duke. I don't hate him as much as a Coach K. They seem like, I kind of hate him. I'm not wishing bad things on him, on Coach, like I did with Coach K. But they oftentimes, it seems like the team has the guy of the tournament on their team, right? That's happened throughout history. And that guy of the tournament is Cooper Flagg. I mean, there's some incredible players, but it's Cooper Flagg. And he's going to be that number 1 pick. He's incredible to watch.
I don't hate Duke right now?
Tell me.
Because I'm not being told constantly I need to love Duke.
Okay, exactly. That is a huge thing.
Embrace them, love them,
Pet's my
respect.
Monkey.
What's that?
Pet my monkey. Lieber absch mein Minky.
That's Sprockets.
It was.
Would you like to touch my monkey?
I would be honored.
Touch him! Love him! Lieber meine Abschminky!
And then I'll do George Michael. Accept Duke before it destroys you. That's another one. Okay. So, yeah, it was a little over the top. Jay Billis waxing poetically. He still waxed poetically.
Now, see, I hate Jay Billis.
He still waxes, but it's not quite the same thing. John Shire doesn't have the same cachet as Coach K, and he seems like more of, obviously, of a regular guy. But they rolled through. Look, I thought Tennessee had a chance to do something because they're an incredible physical team. So give Houston credit. They absolutely roasted them.
Because Houston's calling card is defense. And Tennessee was 0 for their first 14 behind the arc. And then there was one point, I think it was under 4 minutes left in the first half, where Houston blocked as many shots as they allowed Tennessee to score. And that's crazy.
That's wild.
You know, and things kind of opened up a little bit after that 4 minute mark. But Tennessee was virtually shut down the first 16 minutes of the game. Houston's reputation has always been good at defense. It's their offense that has always been challenged, and their offense is a little bit better. Houston lost to Auburn in the third game of the season. There's a huge difference between playing a game in November versus playing a game in late March, early April. Who you got winning at all these?
Well, we haven't talked about Florida.
Okay.
And I think if there's another magical guy, it's their guard, Walton Clayton Jr. And it seemed like he and Florida, but he particularly just willed them back against Texas Tech. And that's another thing you see in championship teams are guys who just, nothing's going to stop them. They're going to will their team, grabbing a loose ball somewhere in the paint, running out to the 3 line, pivoting in a flash and knocking down a big three. I was like, holy moly, this guy. I'm excited about these games. Saturday is going to be fantastic with these big teams going at it. So I really don't know if I were betting. I don't know who the favorite is. I suppose it's Duke, but I'm not sure. Florida has a few too many pieces. I will say there was no chance Michigan or Michigan State were getting through these teams. Like, State is short a player or two. They've got some gutty, really good players, and Izzo is a great coach. He has them. He do the right things when they need to. Neither of these teams were getting through this gauntlet of teams. No chance.
I'm picking Duke to win the national championship. Other than really for no good reason, they just seem to be the smoothest of all the teams. I can see cracks in each of these teams, but gosh, I mean, you can't measure teams by cracks because it seems like half the champions have a moment where it looks like their season would end and then they fight through it, then they go on and win the whole thing. So if you want to go with that argument, it doesn't fly with me. But Duke looks just very smooth. And so that's just who I'm going. But gosh, am I going to be wrong? I'm certainly not going to put any money on it. That's for sure. Speaking of money.
So don't you think this must be an interesting time for Nick? I'm gonna put myself in Nick's shoes for a minute. Forget about all the wildness in sports right now with the transfer portal and all this crap. All the conversations about politics and policy and tariffs and Teslas and all this stuff out there, right? Getting back to our Cooper DeJean conversation, those of us who married you know, whether you support Trump, can't stand him, and it's got to be one of those, right? Because I don't know, is there anybody in the middle? I wonder how many calls Nick gets because my husband wants to sell all our stock or my wife wants to buy or vice versa because one of them is in the other's ear. Maybe they agree, maybe they don't, but they're just going at the whims of the political tide. Like Trump's going to either save the economy or he's going to ruin it. Either way, we need to do something about it. So he's probably getting calls, but I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it be great to have a guy like Nick? Like, no, honey. Yes, all those things are happening, but that's why we have a steady hand at the helm of this ship. It's Nick Hopwood. Yeah. Right? He's going to handle it for us. He knows how to navigate these waters. Let's not do anything rash. Right? Exactly.
Peakwm.com. Peakwm.com. And you talk about relatives who are, quote, once removed, and I don't understand how that means. I think Elon Musk has been removed by the blue side. Don't you think?
The blue side. He's been removed.
I think he's been removed.
Yeah.
Physically.
People are drawing rocket ships or something on Teslas. I don't know what's happening. It's a wild world out there we live in. I got to say, I kind of enjoy watching it all go back and forth, though, I must say.
Oh, I mean, the ups and downs of what's going on and what's responsible for it? Is it tariffs? Is it about inflation and the inflation number? Is it about lowering interest rates? How can interest rates lower if you have tariffs that seemingly cause inflation?
Oh, gosh.
These are all the things that have come up. Somebody like Nick Hopwood doesn't react to the news of the day. He reacts by having a plan for the future.
And guess who else had a plan for a future, Steve? Ward Manuel.
Yes, he did.
And we knew that and we got to give him credit. I think we already gave him
We
credit
did.
for signing Dusty May.
It's not Thanksgiving, but be thankful Ward Manuel and Dusty May not only came to an agreement a year ago, but just as important, an agreement in the middle of the season. Indiana was looking for a new head man. Mike Woodson said he was retiring at the end of the year. It just happened that 2 days later, Michigan is going to Bloomington, Indiana, where everyone was rolling out the red carpet for Dusty May. He was obviously a target, at least from the fan base. Don't know if he was from the administration. Michigan took control of this carefully, deliberately, and contract extension and name off the board. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Maryland.
Yeah.
Who had one of the best seasons in 2 decades, is now looking for a new head coach after Kevin Willard left for Villanova over the weekend. Willard became quite public with his dissatisfaction about Maryland's commitment to NIL as Maryland was preparing for the NCAA tournament. And it happened especially after their AD left to go to SMU. He would say he would call this the worst NIL deal, and I don't know if he meant the worst in the Big Ten, the worst in the country. He really didn't say. I don't know.
Matter. We're the worst.
But he was booed out of the team hotel by a minority of fans as they were on their way to their season-ending loss to Florida in the Sweet 16. I've got video of it. It's incredible. The Maryland to Villanova transfer had been talked about since the beginning of the tournament. It certainly did not die down. Willard claimed ignorance, but then was on his pulpit talking about NIL and where our priorities are at. It's no surprise that he went to Villanova, where there isn't much of a football program either to compete with the NIL dollars. Basketball will be the main program to get the NIL consecration direct.
Yeah, this is going to be a big storyline. Are schools putting their chips on a bigger revenue program like the Big East? There's lots of talk about it right now. This is going to be a theme, a headline, and this will be one thing that we will look at. Like we've looked at the tournament this year. Did NIL make a difference? The other question, another question that's going to be asked in the coming years is, did revenue sharing make a difference? Because they are talking about allocating in the Big East, because of what you said, most of the revenue share toward, or a big chunk of it, let's just say an outsized chunk of it, to the basketball program. So if Willard wants NIL or he wants revenue or resources, he's going to have a better shot in the Big East.
Let me just try to make this simple. The rev share for next year, and it can grow in the years following, but it's $20.5 million. If 75% to 85% of the allowable rev share will go to football, for those that want to be serious about it, that's little left for basketball and all the other sports, okay? 75 to 85% leaves you with only $4 million to play with. Now, Big East schools may not be able to use all of their $20.5 million because they're not getting football money. But my guess is they're probably going to have more than $500,000 to spend. Don't you think?
Oh, they'll have a lot.
I think, and that could be the difference.
Yeah.
In the Big Ten, if you got a certain amount of money allocated to basketball, the Big East schools that don't have football in their equation might be able to offer more. And I brought this up over a year ago, is whether schools even in the Power Four, who in the Big Ten say, forget football, we're going to concentrate on basketball and be the beast in that sport. And we can do that because the majority of the schools in the Big Ten will focus on football, but we're going to concentrate on basketball. And could a Purdue decide to do that?
Yep.
Could a Michigan State decide to do that? Now, I think Michigan State has a lot of pride in their football. They would not really abandon football, but their bread and butter is basketball and has been for quite some time.
Yeah, no, it's a huge question. The Big East is a great litmus test. People are already talking numbers like 6 to 8 million going to basketball for those schools, which will not be what the vast majority, if not all, of the Big Ten schools, for instance, give, or the SEC. And the SEC is probably going to give a little more to baseball than, say, the Big Ten would, for instance. It's a big sport in the SEC, right? So, no, it's going to be an interesting question, man. No doubt about it.
You say $6 to $8 million, that's 30% of a full 20.5 rev share. It's probably likely that if you have a football program you give a darn about, you're not giving 30% to basketball.
Right.
You're giving as much to football as you can.
Mission accomplished, though, if you double or around there what the Big Ten is giving, at least initially, see what it happens, see, because you got to give it up.
Yep.
So we'll see. But yeah, this is a huge, huge question that's on athletic departments right now.
Oh, every department across the country are having some very serious debates about how this pie is getting divvied up. And while there won't be too much debate from the Olympic sport coaches because they know and don't have much ground to stand on, those that are trying to have top-notch football and basketball programs, both trying to make meaningful postseasons, to keep head coaches happy is going to be a serious issue. Just ask Maryland.
You know what keeps head coaches of companies happy, Steve? Maverick Technology Partners. Why? Technology service, staffing, managed services, consultants, solve problems, IT problems. Every problem in your organization, John Bacon said, is a people problem. If it's not a people problem, there's a technology problem behind it. Trust me. They also have CIO placement services. They do it all. Where can you find them? MaverickTechnologyPartners.com. And thank you for the support, Maverick, by the way. MaverickTechnologyPartners.com.
My new favorite movie is going to be Top Gun now.
Top Gun,
Maverick.
Maverick. Pretty good. What else is going on, Steve? Are we talking about football? We're going to shift gears here at some point because football's going to come in hot now, isn't it?
It's going to be part of our main focus in the ensuing weeks, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of basketball news, if not with Michigan, somewhere else too. Football today, defensive line coach Lou Esposito talking to the media today, one of the biggest offseason storylines. Now, I mean, I'm going to give you a nickel. If you know the biggest offseason question, I'll answer it. It's Bryce Underwood and the 50 million questions that go along with that. But one of the real other big offseason storylines is replacing Mason Graham and Kenneth Gratt in the interior of the line. Both could be first-round picks. I'm going to guess that they are. I will say this. For the last 4 years, we've looked at guys who have been difference makers, either on the edge or on the interior, and we say, how are we going to replace these guys? Because they're both being high picks in the first round, and looking at the guys coming up, who's going to be that guy? And every year, Michigan has found somebody to replace them. So whether it's replacing Hutch and Ajabo with Mozzie Smith, or with Chris Jenkins, or with Mike Morris, every year they do. And after 4 years, Greg, I will tell you, they are not rebuilding, they're reloading. One of the guys who I know is going to be good in the interior line, and I'm also going to say there's plenty of guys I don't know very well, but I just have faith that they're going to be. But one of the guys coming back is Rayshon Benny. Benny, by the way, is switching his number from 26 to 55. I think most people know the reference to that. Mason Graham wore 55. With that, it's sort of like the defensive number 1 jersey, I guess, now.
Yeah, so they're not going to retire it after Mason Graham leaves. Okay, go ahead.
And they got guys from the portal like Damon Payne and Trey Williams that are going to fit their system. Now, what's that system? Well, that's what Lou talked about on Monday at the press conference, about being an NFL-like defense, that they're going to, quote, build a wall along that defensive line, the integrity of that line and keeping it. He went on to say that some styles have gap and attack. It's a creative word phrase, and people create a gap while somebody else attacks it, and it leads to someone getting stats, which is great for recruiting. But on the downside, if a Jalen Milroe gets past the attacker and gap integrity is lost, well, then the quarterback is getting chunk yardage or just scoring altogether. So I thought that was the most interesting part of the interview on Monday.
No, I think it's great. I think our identity is we're the biggest, baddest mofos on the block, and we've been able to rebuild that. It's why Ohio State and Alabama had such a big problem despite their great offenses with us. And I really want to keep that. I want to keep that place. Part of that is our strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
But it just has been our brand. And I love that Sharon says smash. Words like that to me matter when you say this is what we're going to do. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. It's kind of what I'm counting on, because us being a finesse team and trying to do that is not our identity. So we got to stick with it.
And there's some teams struggling for identity. I mean, Ohio State has an identity. It's been well discussed and well ridiculed. Wisconsin has kind of left smash, and now they don't know where they're at because they're not finesse either. They're desperately searching for an identity under Luke Fickell as their head coach and a new offensive coordinator, and so are a whole bunch of other teams.
Yep.
The other football story has to involve the former offensive coordinator, Matt Weiss, whose FBI investigation into him looks historic. But people are asking, will this affect the NCAA investigation into the football program? And the answer simply is no. Matt Weiss is accused of using students' information to hack into their emails, social media, cloud storage accounts, everything. And then he's getting somehow private access information, including intimate photos and videos and medical data on these people. The victims...
he social engineered the data he had to determine, get, or figure out passwords. Like, this was an operation that he ran. This is a perverted operation to get that information. He had to have spent a lot of time on this.
Right. And the victims look like they could appear to be in the triple digits. Some are from the University of Michigan itself, but most are student athletes from across the nation, from all division levels. Damages could be well into the millions, but people are wondering, is this a sign that Michigan has gone rogue and adding to the penalties that could potentially happen for the NCAA? The answer is no. Nothing that links Michigan at all in this, other than he happened to be coaching there at the time. When his computers were seized at his home over 2 years ago, the FBI wouldn't say much about it, but only that it wasn't related to the NCAA investigation, and that's where most people take it.
Well, yeah, and this is not on brand for us to talk about controversial stuff, but, you brought it up here, and look, I mean, just from what does this mean? Yes, he has a day in court or whatever, but I've talked to some people, like when it gets to this point and the FBI does this, it's the degree to which he's guilty. And I got to say this, like, we're parents, Steve. We send our kids to schools, and there's a bond or a pact that they're going to be taken care of when they're there, and this is a huge failure. And this is disgusting. Lawsuits are already being brought up. This is a huge violation beyond privacy and data and all that is horrible. And I don't even know where to point the fingers other than this man. But it's a huge, huge disturbing story and a giant letdown and frightening to anyone as a parent or, frankly, anyone who cares about people, which is everybody. So it's disturbing. And, yes, if you sense a little emotion in my voice, the odds are that people I've had in my classroom, not that matters, were probably affected by this. I don't know that. Yeah, but the chances are, in the scale of this, it's very possible. So it's horrible, but there are better things going on in the football program.
Well, there's news by next week that will change the complete landscape of college football and basketball and all sports as we know it. We've been hinting about it for weeks and months, and April 7th, D-Day, coming up.
This is a big deal. People ask me, well, what are you watching for? Okay, I think this will probably be a slam dunk. It's possible that there are some slight alterations, hopefully improvements in the settlement, but I doubt it. I think the settlement's going to get approved in principle. Who knows? But that's next Monday, right? That's April 7th. Okay. But there have been some public statements like the SEC saying we're not going to increase our scholarships in football. The Big Ten's been relatively quiet, though, Steve. So I wonder. There's been a lot of talk in athletic departments. People are planning for this. I wonder if you're going to hear more public statements from leadership like the Big Ten to go, we're going to say, here are the guidelines. It's this for football. It's this for men's basketball. It's this for women's. And then you got the rest of this to figure out. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear something from the Big Ten office about it. It kind of makes sense that you would look to the Big Ten. If they don't, then they're kind of leaving that window open for, say, a Purdue or an Indiana to go, we're going to press more on basketball, or we're going to let you programs with a hockey program figure out how do you want to handle it. That could be the only thing. But that's what I would look for, is more big picture public information. Details about who's getting what behind the scenes, like players and individual, we're not going to hear that. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get more big specifics or guidance from the Big Ten.
What we're seeing is that a university says something and we kind of get an idea of what they're going to do, and then somebody else makes their statement, and then we start seeing trends. That's how we come up with this, 75 to 85% of the budget from a $20.5 million rev share going to football players only. We're just kind of seeing that based on information that's kind of been leaked out with other universities. One thing I would like just to put a pin in it, some news happening out of Colorado. First of all, Prime just got a 5-year, $54 million extension.
I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah.
That he's sticking around. I thought he had a foot in the NFL, but yeah.
His style may not actually work like with the Dallas Cowboys or with the pro team.
I don't think it would have.
Yeah.
So I think this
so
is
I think
smart for
yeah,
him.
there we go.
Yeah.
So I'm not accusing Dion of ever being dumb.
Yeah.
So it looks like he's staying at Colorado. And at the same time, the legislature in the state of Colorado is going to make it legal for universities to pay NIL directly to the athletes without having middle people involved. And so I wonder, this is what I mean, put a pin in it, does Colorado's football program start to excel from here? These are two big potential things that could lead to something much bigger.
Yes.
For a program.
Basically, what you're saying is there is some provision for the athletic departments in the settlement to be more involved. And if the athletes do work for the athletic department, Colorado is taking it a step further, right, where it's kind of all in-house. So if you bundle in the revenue sharing with the NIL, they're controlling a lot more money, which in essence suggests that Dion is controlling a lot more money and can distribute it how he wants. So it's an interesting question. Speaking of interesting questions, I've got a guy who, again, is probably the busiest guy right now in Schembecker Hall other than Sharon, who's Sean McGee coming in. And he's our general manager for football. He's the one
coming in for your class, not for the podcast.
Yeah, we're going to have him on. Here he is. Bring in Sean. Boy, that would be a fun one. That would be a tough pull right now, Steve, to get him on for 45 minutes on a pod. But maybe Sam could pull it off. I don't know about us. So he's visiting. It should be wild. I have so many questions for him. It's off the record, so I'm not going to come back here and be able to spill the beans. But you are seeing some interesting hires with other GMs at other schools. You may have heard that Steph Curry, of course, of the Warriors, is a GM or the GM for the Davidson basketball team, men and women's. I don't know if you heard that.
I thought that would be a full-time gig. It's like, is he retired from basketball?
No, it's not. And I just heard that Trae Young is doing the same thing in Oklahoma. So those two guys, they're still playing in the NBA, and they're at a very high level, by the way.
Right. They're in season for crying out loud.
Yeah, are they grading players and evaluating talent, meeting with players and companies about NIL deals and scouting and doing – no. They are raising money, Steve. They are donating money. I heard Trey came in with $1 million of his own to help his old team. And I think I can go hang out with Steph Curry and have coffee.
How ironic.
Can I play Steph one-on-one? Can my son? How much is that going to cost?
How ironic is it that Trae Young probably wanted to be able to do something to get a little extra cash while he was playing at Oklahoma, and they said, no, absolutely not. You cannot do this, but it's only like $30. No, you cannot.
Yeah, I know it.
And then he turns around and says, here's $1 million.
Yeah.
I don't need that $30 that I was asking for a few years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, these guys have made so much success, and they want to give back. But I still sense a little bit of, well, where was mine from former players? And
Sure.
it's why I think a strategy for some of the smaller sports is to go after their alums. They're like, are you kidding me? All this stuff they have now, all these resources. Like, I gave at the office. It's interesting. Andrew Luck, Steve, did you know he's a general man? Now he's retired, of course.
Right.
Retired early from the NFL.
Right.
Quarterback at Stanford for Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
He's a GM, and he's incredible. It's the opposite. He's incredibly hands-on. He's more hands-on than Sean McGee is hands-on at Michigan. He's actually also responsible for the staff. So he's making staff decisions and things like this at Stanford. So he's got a lot going on.
By the way, Stanford hired a football coach. Frank Reich is their interim football coach for 2025. So they're going to have him for a year and then figure out what they're going to do the rest of the time.
Wild.
Frank Reich and Andrew Luck back at Stanford, playing mostly on the East Coast.
Yeah, no, that's it. I got another, speaking of all this, I've got Mr. Nate Forbes, a.k.a. Uncle Nate, and Jared Wangler coming in. And Uncle Nate, of course, was one of the people that helped coordinate, we believe helped finance a little bit, a lot of the big deals you've heard about, including Bryce Underwood, and really started to kickstart Champion Circle. Jared Wangler, of course, the founder of Champion Circle, and Valiant. And if you want to know where, most people think collectives are going, they think they're going to go more toward what Valiant does, which is more like player representation and brand deals and stuff like that. Icing on the cake. Less, hey, let's get a bunch of money together and funnel it to the players, which is kind of what the collective.
And it's got to get that authorization from the collective judges led by Ohio State's AD, Ross Bjork, and that every single deal is going to be scrutinized. And I'm like, there's no way this is happening.
I'm less optimistic that they're going to, even with, the Power Four hired Deloitte, and they got the company that runs the software that does the salary cap in the NBA. It still requires the players to submit all their deals and all these other things. I have more questions now than answers. I think that's going to be a bureaucratic mess.
We've pointed this out over a year ago.
Yeah.
This is our nose in the air and rolling of the eyes moment about how that's going to work.
Just the last thing, and it may not be a huge deal to many people, but the whole notion that, say, the football team's going to fund the full 105 scholarships may be something that's still up in the air. And that may come back to something that the Big Ten has talked about, where we maybe we stick closer to the 85 scholarship limit or something like that. We'll see.
So if you did 85 scholarships, can you still technically have 20 walk-ons?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to give them a scholarship. Right.
So the walk-on program lives.
We can have 105 scholar with walk-ons.
The walk-on program lives after all.
How would you like that, Steve? 105 walk-ons and just, pay them through NIL.
I just think it's funny that from the surface, it seems like it's more favorable in people's eyes to have 85 scholarships and 20 walk-ons as opposed to 105 scholarships, but the walk-on program is saved.
Right. There you go.
I think there's a certain irony in that not everybody gets.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're going. And I don't think that's something only you care about, in fact, Steve.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Everybody knows nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody cares.
I care.
Then do whatever you want.
All right. I'm sure you and I are tired of the endless basketball reviews that go on.
Please stop.
For every little thing. And
I'd rather they just leave it on the floor. I'm so tired of it.
And I thought that they could only do these things in the final 2 minutes, but they're reviewing, goaltendings and three-point line. And it doesn't matter what point of the game is. We're stopping this and we're going to review it anyway. It's turning the game over 2.5 hours. At the risk of making this game even longer for the case of reviews, I am so curious that while they spend so much time getting the right amount tenths left on the clock at the end of a play, nobody is bothering to check the monitor to see if the clocks started on time at the beginning of the play.
Right. I had never thought about this. We're always looking at the final tenths. But while they're reviewing it, did we start the clock correctly? Right.
So, for example,
shot clock, for instance, is probably always a little variable there.
Yeah. If you're constantly adjusting the end, should you not be looking at the beginning? If it's the same
Thanks
finger,
a lot, Steve.
If it's the same finger that presses the button at the end of the play, it's the same one that presses it at the beginning of the play.
Right.
At the right time. But no one ever checks that.
It's a great question. I thought about this just to wrap about the guys, and I think the spirit of all these rules is they're supposed to look for something obvious, but they never leave it at obvious, right? And it occurs to me that these two people staring at this tiny little screen are human beings, and they have to drive home at night. And so, and they have to go on social media, and they have families. So they're making us review this. I'm spending a lot of time to get this right. I don't care about it. It's obvious. I'm going to find out every single probably do the same thing. It's screw you. Yeah, it's not obvious. Show me another angle because someone at home has an angle that they probably saw, and I don't want to be wrong.
This What Really Happened replay.
So I'm going to try to make this right.
Well, it's hilarious. It starts off with the players waving their finger in a circle after every single play that happes. They're just and they darn know well they can't review this at this particular time.
Steve, interestingly enough, that wave is also the signal for me to go to the bathroom. Head for the bathroom, because it's going to be a few minutes.
It's a way of politely saying you screwed up without being called for a technical foul. Then the referees, the three of them, get in the huddle to decide whether we should even look at the review. So that may take 30 seconds in itself. Then they elect one guy to look at the monitor, and he looks at it, and he looks at it at a different angle. Then he comes back out to the other two and said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm not exactly sure. How about you come along with me, and you take a look at it? So now two of the three come to look at it, And then they huddle back again and make their decision and discussion, and it's like 5 minutes have gone by. It seems all the momentum is completely taken out of the game itself. It's been going on for a while. Someday they'll do something about it. I just don't think it will be soon enough.
No, it will not.
With that, Greg, another episode of The Professor and the Pundit in the books. We've got 3 more left in this season before we wrap it up for the summertime, or when breaking news takes place.
We've had emergency episodes, but we'll take you through the spring game, I believe, if the calendar lines up. And thanks for listening, man. What else, Steven? Is that it?
Puts another wrap on things, and just a reminder that Michigan basketball is the undisputed Big Ten tournament champions. Go Blue, Greg.
Go Blue.